I grew up in a house where fairness was spoken about like a rule, not a choice. My father repeated it often, especially when it came to me and my younger sister, Lily. I treat my children equally, he would say at dinner, at family gatherings, even in front of relatives. Hearing that made me feel safe. It made me believe that no matter what happened, I wouldn't be left behind. School was my escape. I studied hard because I believed education was the one thing that could change my life. When my university acceptance letter arrived, I read it 3 times to make sure it was real. It wasn't a famous school, but it was solid and close to home. I thought Dad would be proud. Instead, he looked calm, almost distant. We sat at the kitchen table a few days later. Papers were spread between us. I asked him how we would pay for tuition. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I don't have money saved for college," he said. "You'll need student loans. That's how people grow." The words hit harder than I expected. I waited for him to add something else, some hidden plan, some help, but he didn't. He told me loans were normal, that struggle built discipline. I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my father. Why would he mislead me? So I signed the loan documents. Then more the next semester, and more after that. Each signature felt heavier than the last. The numbers grew quietly, like a storm forming in the distance. I tried not to think about it. To keep up, I took a night job at a gas station. I studied during the day and worked until early morning. Sleep became a luxury. Some nights, I sat behind the counter staring at the clock, wondering how long it would take to feel normal again. When I complained, Dad told me I was doing great, and reminded me that hardship builds character. At home, money was a forbidden topic. If I asked questions, Dad changed the subject. He said worrying too much showed weakness. So I stopped asking. Then Lily's acceptance letter arrived. It was from a private university overseas, one I knew we could never afford. I expected Dad to say no. Instead, he hugged her and cried. He told the family this was her dream and dreams must be supported. I clapped with everyone else, smiling through confusion. That night, lying awake after a long shift, I stared at the ceiling and felt something I couldn't explain. It wasn't anger yet. It was a quiet unease. A feeling that the promise I grew up believing might not have been real after all. And that feeling would soon change everything. Lily left the country 2 weeks later. The house felt quieter without her laughter, but Dad seemed lighter, almost energized. He talked about her future like it was an investment already paying off. Every phone call ended with him smiling, telling her how proud he was. I listened from the hallway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. At first, I tried not to follow Lily's life too closely. I told myself it would only make things harder. But curiosity crept in, one night. After finishing a late shift and eating instant noodles in my room, I opened my phone and scrolled through her social media. What I saw didn't look like student life. There were photos of rooftop restaurants, ocean views, and luxury apartments. Her clothes changed every week, brands I recognized but could never afford. She posted stories from weekend trips to other countries, smiling like money was something that simply appeared when she needed it. I did the math in my head. Tuition alone at her university was more than my yearly income. Rent overseas was insane. Flights, food, shopping, it didn't make sense. No scholarship could cover this. Something was wrong. When I asked Dad how Lily was managing so well, he brushed it off. "Living abroad isn't that expensive if you're smart," he said. I knew that wasn't true. The doubt grew slowly, like poison. Every new post added weight to it. While I skipped meals to save money, Lily posted photos of wine glasses and sunsets. I told myself not to be bitter, but the contrast was impossible to ignore. Then came the night that changed everything. I came home early from work and heard Dad's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone, speaking in a low, careful tone I'd never heard before. I froze near the door. "Yes," he said quietly. "The transfer went through. 50,000 this time." There was a pause. "Don't worry, she doesn't know." My heart started racing. $50,000? For what? I waited until he hung up, then pretended I had just arrived. He smiled like nothing happened. But I couldn't forget his words. That night, sleep was impossible. Questions screamed in my head. Where was that money coming from? And why did it need to be hidden from me? The next day, I started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I trusted my instinct. After hours of digging through public property records, I found it. A house. My grandparents' old house. It had been sold 6 months earlier. The sale price was just over 500 zalozen. My stomach dropped. That house was supposed to be part of our future, mine and Lily's. No one had told me it was gone. Suddenly, Lily's perfect life made sense. So did Dad's calm confidence when I struggled with debt. The money existed, it had always existed. It just wasn't meant for me. In that moment, I realized the life I was watching on my phone wasn't just different from mine, it was built on a lie. And that lie was funded by my silence. I didn't confront my father right away. I carried the truth with me for days, like a weight pressing on my chest. Every time I saw him drink his morning coffee or watch the news, I wondered how he could act so normal. How he could look at me and say nothing. Finally, one evening, I couldn't hold it anymore. I spread my student loan papers across the kitchen table. The numbers were circled in red. Interest rates. Payment schedules. Years of debt. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I asked him to sit down. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced at the papers and sighed, already annoyed. "What is this about now?" I asked him directly. I told him I knew about the house. I told him I knew about the money transfers. I asked him why Lily's education was worth $500,000 while I was buried under loans. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Yes," he said calmly. "I paid for Lily. That was it. No apology, no explanation." I felt heat rush to my face. "Why?" I asked. "Why her and not me?" He looked at me like I had asked something stupid. "She needed it more," he said. "You're independent. You always have been." I reminded him of his promise. The one he repeated my whole life. Equal treatment. Equal support. He waved his hand like it meant nothing. "Life isn't equal," he replied. "You should understand that by now." The words cut deeper than the debt ever did. I asked him how he could watch me work myself to exhaustion while knowing he had the money to help. His answer was cold and final. "Struggle makes strong people. You'll survive." That's when I realized he truly believed he was right. Later that night, I called an old family friend, someone who had known my parents for decades. I didn't know why. I just needed someone to tell me I was wrong. Instead, they told me the truth. Lily wasn't even a full-time student anymore. She had dropped out in her second year. The university had sent warnings. Dad knew. The money wasn't paying for classes, it was paying for rent, travel, and a business idea that failed within months. The education excuse was a cover. I confronted Lily over a video call. At first, she denied everything. Then she laughed. "Dad said you'd be fine," she told me. "He said you don't really need help." Hearing that broke something inside me. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional. My father hadn't just chosen her future over mine, he had rewritten reality to justify it. That night I understood something painful and permanent. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and it had been made a long time ago. After the call with Lily, nothing felt real anymore. The house felt smaller, colder. Every sound, footsteps, doors closing, Dad clearing his throat, made my nerves tighten. I kept replaying her words in my head. "Dad said you'd be fine." It sounded rehearsed. Like a line she had been given long ago. I started looking deeper, not just at Dad's finances, but at mine. One afternoon, while reviewing my student loan account online, I noticed something strange. Refund amounts had been issued in earlier years, money I never remembered receiving. The dates lined up with semesters when I was barely surviving. Borrowing cash for groceries. I went through old emails. Buried in the spam folder were automated messages about deposits I had never seen. My chest tightened as I realized what it meant. Someone had access to my account. I confronted Dad again, this time with proof. He didn't shout. He didn't deny it right away either. He just stared at the screen, silent. That silence was louder than any confession. Finally, he spoke. "I was going to pay it back," he said. "Once things worked out." Things. Lily's lifestyle, the failed startup, the lies. He admitted he had redirected student loan refunds from my account to help Lily overseas. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself I wouldn't notice. He told himself I was strong enough to handle it. I felt sick. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was fraud. I gave him a choice: fix it, or I would report it. He begged me not to. He said it would destroy the family. He said people wouldn't understand. For the first time, he sounded scared. But the damage was already done. The family he was trying to protect no longer existed. I reported everything. The investigation took months. Bank records were traced. Property sales were reviewed. Emails were recovered. The truth unfolded slowly, painfully. Each document confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was planned. Relatives started calling. Some supported me. Others accused me of betrayal. Family gatherings stopped overnight. Holidays passed in silence. My phone stayed quiet. Dad denied everything publicly, even as the evidence stacked up. Behind closed doors, he blamed me. He said I was ungrateful. He said I ruined his life. Lily vanished. Her accounts went dark. No calls, no messages. It was like she never existed. In the end, the law didn't take everything from Dad. But life did. His reputation collapsed. Friends disappeared. His savings were drained by legal fees. The man who once controlled everything now sat alone in a house full of echoes. And me. I learned the hardest truth of all. The most dangerous lies aren't told to strangers. They're told inside families, quietly over years, until the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The investigation ended quietly. There was no dramatic arrest, no flashing lights, no headlines. Just paperwork, final notices, and long silences. My father avoided prison because of his age, clean record, and partial repayments ordered by the court. On paper, it looked like he got lucky. In real life, he lost everything that mattered. People stopped calling him. Old friends crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Family members who once defended him slowly disappeared. The man who controlled money, decisions, and futures now lived alone with his choices. When I saw him months later, he looked smaller. Older. Like someone who had finally run out of excuses. We didn't talk. Lily never came back home. I heard rumors through distant relatives. She moved cities. Changed jobs, tried to start over. The money was gone. The lifestyle vanished. The silence she left behind was louder than any apology she never gave. As for me, nothing magically improved. I still wake up thinking about numbers. Interest rates. Due dates. The debt didn't disappear just because the truth came out. I still work long hours. I still budget carefully. Some nights, fear creeps in. Fear that I'll be paying for someone else's decisions forever. But something inside me changed. For years, I believed my struggle meant weakness. That I wasn't good enough to deserve help. That belief was planted carefully, repeated until it felt normal. When the truth came out, it hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped blaming myself. I learned that betrayal doesn't always come with anger or violence. Sometimes it comes wrapped in advice. In lessons about character and strength. Sometimes it sounds like love. The hardest part wasn't losing money. It was losing the version of my father I thought I knew. People ask me now if I regret reporting him. The answer is simple: no. Silence would have destroyed me more slowly, but just as completely. Telling the truth cost me a family, but keeping the lie would have cost me my sanity. I'm rebuilding. Slowly, honestly. I don't trust easily anymore, but I trust myself. I read every document. I ask questions. I no longer accept suffering as a test of worth. This story isn't just about favoritism or money. It's about how easily power hides inside families. How one person's comfort can be built on another person's sacrifice. And how the deepest crimes don't always break laws, they break bonds. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes surviving isn't about being strong. Sometimes it's about finally refusing to drown in someone else's lie. Life didn't reset after everything ended. There was no clean break between the past and the future. Instead, the truth followed me into ordinary moments, at work, on the bus, in quiet rooms where my thoughts grew loud. Healing didn't arrive as relief. It arrived as exhaustion. For a long time I felt numb. I kept expecting an apology that never came. Not from my father. Not from Lily. The silence felt intentional, like one final decision made without me. Some nights, I imagined what I would say if they called. Other nights, I realized I didn't want the call at all. I started therapy because the anger had nowhere to go. The therapist said something that stayed with me. Betrayal by family rewires how you see the world. That explained why trust suddenly felt dangerous. Why kindness sometimes felt suspicious. Why love came with conditions in my mind. Slowly I began to notice patterns I had ignored my whole life. How I apologized for asking for help, how I minimized my pain, how I believed being low maintenance made me worthy. Those habits didn't come from nowhere. They were learned, carefully taught. I realized my father hadn't just controlled money, he controlled the story. The story that Lily was fragile, that I was strong, that sacrifice was my role, that obedience was love. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. The reckoning wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I started setting boundaries. With relatives. With coworkers. With myself. I stopped explaining my past to people who wanted to debate it. I stopped chasing validation from those who benefited from my silence. One day, I checked my loan balance and didn't panic. The number was still high, but it no longer defined me. It was a problem to solve, not a judgment of my worth. That was new. I also stopped hiding the truth. When people asked why I worked so much, I told them, not with shame, with honesty. Some listened, some didn't, but the story was finally mine. I don't know if my father understands what he did. I don't know if Lily ever will. And I've learned that closure doesn't always come from the people who caused the damage. Sometimes, it comes from choosing yourself consistently, quietly, without permission. This chapter of my life isn't about loss anymore. It's about reckoning with reality and deciding what kind of future I refuse to repeat. The betrayal shaped me, but it doesn't own me. And that, finally, feels like justice. My father told me he had no money for my education. Then I discovered he secretly spent $500,000 funding my sister's college, while I drowned in debt. And that was only the beginning.